Hey everybody, Dawn Zoldi here, and welcome back to your Dawn of Drones podcast. We are closing out an incredible month that we've just dedicated to critical infrastructure support, sponsored by SAIC. And what better company to talk about this than Sharper Shape? And today we have with us Chris McMurtry. He is the Director of Customer Operations there at Sharper Shape. And Chris, by the way, is with us as part of our ongoing and year-long Volatus Above and Beyond series. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is really fun. I've not been on such a sophisticated podcast before, so this is great.
No worries. Well, everybody out there, and I know you're out there, don't forget, we are live. And so please say hi, tell us where you're from, ask Chris some questions. We love that kind of engagement, so we'll be standing by for your comments. But in the meantime, I've got a big one, everybody. Drum roll, please. This is our 100th episode. Yes, you heard that right. 100 episodes for the Dawn of Drones. And what a journey it's been. I was telling Chris before we started how we kind of started with Interdrone, with Drones at Dawn, and then we went to Drone Life, rebranded to Dawn of Drones. And now we've been with AUVSI for 6 months. We're hitting our 100th episode. And I'll tell you what, we've had so many incredible guests. And if you missed any of these shows, you can find them all on my P3 Tech, number one, on my website, and number two, on my Dawn Zoldi YouTube channel. So please subscribe and check that out. But Chris, we're here to talk about you and Sharper Shape. And I'm really excited to share with people what you're doing because frankly, until Danielle Gagne from Volatus said, hey, we're selecting Chris, we're selecting Sharper Shape to be on the show in June, I had never really heard much about you. And so I'm excited to share what you're doing with everybody out there. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into the company.
Okay, sure. So I started out in television broadcasting. I had a long career doing NBA television broadcasting for the Portland Trailblazers. Yeah, so I came from kind of a technical background there, but in the NBA, there's kind of a lull in the summers, and I was into video production, so I would do my own video productions. So starting in 2011, I started using drones to do some aspects of these things that I was putting together kind of just as independent projects from the NBA. And the drones just blew me away what they could do. And particularly there was one job where the client wanted a helicopter shot, but it was at a remote location in eastern Washington, and we brought in the drones. It was just fabulous. It saved us a ton of money. The shots were great. We used way more of these shots than we anticipated originally, and so it's like, wow, drones are just incredible. They're going to change a lot of industries. But I wanted to start a company that took advantage of drones for more than just entertainment purposes. So I thought about it for a while and said, well, you know what? I think drones for inspecting critical infrastructure is going to be really a terrific use of this technology. So in 2013, I started a company that was called Aerial Inspection Resources, and it was dedicated to doing exactly that, to looking at wind turbines and solar panels and power lines. And those are the kind of the things we concentrated on. We also concentrated on maybe more of the higher end of what you could use drones for, specifically LiDAR. And so we did some really early LiDAR scanning with drones, very unusual back in that day, and very scary to put a $100,000 LiDAR scanner on a drone, back in 2013, say.
No kidding. I mean, you're talking before in the U.S., right? Before Part 107 even.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You're in the Section
We did
333 world
We
here. Yeah.
did the 333. Yep, we did the 333 exemption and spent a ton of money on lawyers to get a 333 exemption. People these days don't know how good they have it because
Right.
it was tough to get legal operations back in those days, but we did. And at any rate, I was doing this, but what I found was that we could go out in the field and we could get this data, we could get the LiDAR data, we could get the images. But I was spending just a ton of time in the office trying to package all those materials and get it back to the customer. I found that I was spending 3 to 4 times the amount of time I was spending in the field just trying to analyze and package the data on the backside, and it was kind of killing the business.
Right.
So I used to attend a lot of trade shows as for part of my company. And along this time, I left the NBA in 2015, went full time on the drone business. But as I said, there was problems really analyzing the data and doing something with it. So I started running into Sharper Shape at some of these trade shows, and I was really impressed with what they were doing. I recognized that they were building a platform that was going to solve the problems that I specifically was having with my drone company, and figured that if it would help me, it would help a lot of others. Eventually, in 2016, I decided I'm going to close my company and just go to work for Sharper Shape. So that's what I did, and I've been working with them ever since. So, and we just, by the way, Sharper Shape itself, you've got your 100th show here, Sharper Shape. This morning we did a 10-year celebration. We've been around exactly 10 years now. So.
Well, that really speaks volumes. Number one, you left, I would think, a pretty great job at the NBA to go full time in your company, and then to grow that, get that experience that you garnered doing that drone work, and to go to Sharper Shape full time. I think that speaks volumes about the company. So tell us a little bit about Sharper Shape. Tell us really what, kind of what the company does do and where it's from.
Okay, so Sharper Shape is a Finnish company, and they started in Finland 10 years ago, and they primarily are a software company. That's the way we see ourselves, is a software company, and then we do data field collections as an adjunct to our software operations. So here on this slide, we'll collect data in any way that is required for the job. So we started off with a real focus on beyond visual line of sight drones, because in Finland they were able to actually get permissions to fly beyond visual line of sight starting back in 2013. It's just
my gosh.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I've got envy here.
Oh, me too. When I went over there after I started with the company, and you see how easy it was for them to fly beyond visual line of sight, it was really amazing, because they would basically just go to the equivalent of the FAA in Finland, and they could sit down with like one of the chief operating people for the airspace in Finland, and they would say, okay, sure, we'll just close this corridor for you, go for it. And so Sharper Shape did a ton of beyond visual line of sight stuff way back, and became one of the world leaders in beyond visual line of sight drone flights. But well, we actually have a video that kind of goes through the whole kind of origin story for the company. So I don't know if you want to roll that now, or
that sounds like a great plan. Let's go ahead and roll that video.
Sharper Shape has always been focused on creating technology solutions for industry, and beyond visual line of sight drones was an early focus. The company performed a series of BVLOS package delivery demonstrations for the Finnish postal service Posti, becoming an early leader in BVLOS UAS technology. Sharper Shape also targeted another important use of BVLOS aerial technology, identifying vegetation clearance issues along electric utility corridors. Developing the software and hardware to meet this need became the company's primary mission. By 2013, the renowned Geospatial Research Institute of Finland had concluded a 10-year project to create algorithms capable of analyzing LiDAR data to identify trees and vegetation. Sharper Shape acquired these algorithms, and the company was born. ACA, short for Automatic Corridor Clearance Analysis, was an immediate success, helping Finnish utilities to take on the challenges of a robust vegetation canopy. The success was noted by venture capital firms, providing the funds needed to continue developing the ACA application. Sharper Shape continued to develop on the hardware side as well, producing increasingly powerful UAS platforms to complement the sophisticated multi-sensor systems. The slogan of "One Flight, Many Apps" became the company's mantra, and the first Sharper Scope sensor system was released in the summer of 2016. The company opened its U.S. headquarters in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and established the groundbreaking Edison Electric Institute Consortium to promote BVLOS electric utility assessments. With BVLOS authorizations remaining elusive, automatic detailed inspection was created in order to bring together Sharper Shape's expertise with software and LiDAR data processing with the increasing power of small UAS platforms. While still waiting for BVLOS approval, a pivot to manned aircraft operations began in 2017. This proved to be an excellent move, as multiple large contracts were quickly secured, including, in 2019, what may be one of the largest projects of its type ever attempted, capturing 26,000 miles of utility distribution circuits in 5 months. This was truly a marathon, and a testament to the engineering of the Heloscope system. But all along, Sharper Shape had been steadily building on the foundation of the original ACA software platform. With the release of Core during the summer of 2017, the company's vision of a software platform purpose-built for electric utility inspections was realized. The cloud-based WebCore incorporates a powerful map-based asset viewer, along with modules for flight planning, project tracking, asset inspection, and report creation, all running in any modern web browser. And the Core ecosystem includes companion iOS apps for helicopter, drone, and walking patrols, bringing the power of Core to crews in the field. From data collection to assessments and finally reporting, Sharper Shape truly offers the full circle of utility inspection services.
Such a great video. And, I saw as part of that, the one article that talked about avoiding blackouts. There's a drone for that. And, as I think about that, Chris, and where we are right now, right in the middle of the summer, and I just read the other day, Texas is having this incredible heat wave. The power goes out and it's a serious issue. People die, right? In extreme heat. Of course, we know also that some of these power lines, if they're not maintained properly, can start wildland fires, and we've seen the world on fire, but certainly several parts of the United States, some of which were started by, utilities. And so this idea of inspecting critical infrastructure is really key, and I love what you guys are doing. So obviously your mission is to create a better world through a safer world through these better insights. Can you share some of the success stories you've had since you've been there?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So maybe you picked up in the video, but the Sharper Shape started by acquiring these algorithms to be able to analyze point cloud data and identify vegetation clearance issues around power lines. And that's really still a very core competency for the company. And so we have done an enormous amount of work taking these LiDAR point clouds and analyzing them with our AI tools and identifying for utilities areas where they have issues that they need to address. And for one project alone, we have identified over 300,000 different areas where they needed to address the vegetation clearances.
Oh
and
my
so,
gosh. Well, hey,
yeah,
before we get deeper into that, no pun intended here, we're talking about vegetation growing, but can you explain the risk that vegetation poses to these lines?
Yeah, absolutely. So a big part of the risk is that the vegetation, the trees grow too tall, and then if they happen to topple over, they will strike the lines. They can start a fire that way. Another way is that the branches just grow into the lines, and then they may not touch the line during a calm weather period, but maybe the wind comes up, the tree sways into the lines, and it starts bridging the conductors, creating sparks. And in California, it doesn't take anything at all to ignite a fire right now. So I live up in Oregon, and a couple of years ago, we had a huge windstorm that came up on Labor Day, and it blew branches out of the trees. They bridged the lines, started fires, several fires simultaneously,
Oh my God.
and many people were killed. And a whole town, Phoenix in Oregon, it's not Phoenix, Arizona, Phoenix, Oregon, was basically burned to the ground. So so it's really critical that utilities maintain the vegetation around their lines and keep these clearances. And you may think you've got clearances just as it's a calm day, but when the wind starts howling, and it does, then you start to run into problems. So that's one thing. We also simultaneously, the whole thing about one flight, many apps. We collect the LiDAR data. We also collect high resolution visual data so that the customers can go in and inspect their physical components and look for damage there, because a couple of the big fires have also been caused by the failing components on lines. A lot of the utility equipment out there is 60, 70 years old. It's been in the field a long time, and so it does need to be inspected.
Well, and a lot of this is privately owned, as we know, in the United States. Now, I had interrupted you. You were talking about at least one example of a success story where just one inspection revealed over 300 points of concern where vegetation.
300,000, right?
Oh, how many?
300,000.
300,000?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of these utilities have a lot of mileage. One customer, one success story of ours would be we did for one customer in 2019 26,000 miles of inspections. Now, using helicopters, for that was just way too big a job for drones. But yeah, I mean, and out here in the West, vegetation grows fast. There's these trees grow quickly. And so there are a lot of areas that the utilities need to address. It's hard to stay ahead of it. By the time you clear the line 1 year, you've got to start back over. It's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. There's just no way to stay in front of it.
I'm just curious, Chris, because, in some other, let's just say, analogous niche areas like facade inspections, only a handful of cities right now and states actually require inspections of those incredibly aging structures, some of which have fallen down and killed people right off the front of buildings.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We were just at the Energy, Drone, and Robotics Coalition Summit and talking about methane compliance. And, there's a whole raft of federal requirements in the United States and growing. I think the Biden administration is laying out a handful more, and also this third-party reporting, which is very interesting. But I'm just curious for this vegetation issue. Is there a legal requirement, regulatory requirement for these inspections, or is this something that is just a safe thing to do? Because I think that's a harder sell for companies sometimes, right, when they're looking at their bottom lines. So I'm just curious what you're seeing out there in terms of the inspections, and are they required?
Yeah, they sure are. There are federal regulations that require inspections, and that also prescribe punishments if you fail to do so for transmission lines. Distribution's a little bit different. Distribution isn't quite as regulated, but for high voltage transmission lines, there is absolutely a very strict set of codes that say you must inspect this frequently, and you must maintain a clear right of way around these.
Well, considering the risks that you just mentioned a little bit earlier, it makes a lot of sense that there would be this requirement. And so, as you mentioned, Chris, your Sharper Shape, your company is very focused on the software. At least that's kind of the heart or the core, no pun intended, of what you're doing. So tell us about CORE itself. So CORE, C-O-R-E, is an acronym.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell us what it is and what it does.
Okay, so CORE stands for Cloud Optimized Remote Evaluation, and CORE is kind of the mothership of our software applications. CORE is a hosting environment for AI technologies, for those algorithms that I spoke about that do the vegetation clearance analysis, where we're standing up a lot of AI intelligence for visual inspections of components. and all that runs in Core. Then the customer interfaces with Core through a web browser, and we call that Web Core. So the customer is able to get in and browse through their assets in a map-based environment, click on any pole or line segment or substation, get information about that, pull up all the photos related to that particular pole or line segment, examine those photos, zoom deeply into those photos. In another module in the program, it's an assessment module. You can pull up the photos, you can browse through the photos, zoom in, find issues, mark, annotate, and report right out of the software. And then in the same interface, there's a full LiDAR point cloud viewer. So you've got a map with the assets, you've got a 2D image viewer, and you've got the LiDAR point cloud all synchronized together. So as you move through the assets, the LiDAR synchronizes with the photos, and it's very very fast. It's amazing how it works, even streaming across the internet. A lot of the image data we gather comes from phase 100 megapixel cameras, and you can pull up these images even across the internet with a reasonable web connection, nothing fancy, and really quickly and seamlessly browse through these images. So
here's a slide, Chris,
yeah.
where you kind of outline the different modules that you
Right.
ran through. Is there anything on here you wanted to highlight?
Well, for this crew, I would say the flight orders would be quite an interesting module. So you see there's a line running north, south, and east and west there. And this is just a small segment of a larger project, but you would go into the flight order module, and you would draw a polygon around the specific assets that you want one of your drone teams to go inspect. Create the flight order, assign the flight order to a drone team, and then the drone team has a iOS app that they are able to open, and it will show that flight order to them immediately, almost in real time. So as I create those flight orders, they're assigned on the iOS drone pilot there, and they see the same flight order that you just created in WebCore. And as they work through their assignment for that day, they can mark things as completed. And now back in the office on WebCore, I see, okay, that this team just completed that structure. They're moving to this structure. They did that structure. The drone pilot application has risk assessments that the team can fill out, and so I can view those risk assessments and make sure that they are following the safety protocols in the field. And it also has GIS layers that includes anything we can get from the customer. So in some cases, we get terrific information from the customers. We have GIS layers for locked gates and who has the key for that locked gate.
Oh, wow.
And there's a bad dog on this block, and there's a customer concern here. And those things can be put into this same application, and the drone teams out in the field have all that right at their fingertips, including the accessibility of the structures and driving directions to get to the structures. All those in an application that basically interacts directly with WebCore back and forth.
So it's an amazing team management function. You mentioned that customers, these utility and, clients, if you will, can input information. So they also have access to this, where they can put in like information, like there's a dog, there's a dog at that gate, so be careful.
Yep, exactly. Sure. Customers can give us that information in advance. We can put it into the application, and the teams in the field will be able to access that information. They also, I at the office on WebCore or the team in the field on iOS on the iOS application can add notes and just make a note. We didn't know about that bad dog, but there's a bad dog there, so now everybody knows about it, and it's in the application. And the big part of the application, as I said at the beginning, is taking all this data and doing something with it and getting deliverables to the customer. Well, one of the great deliverables for the customer is just having access to that map-based view there and the viewer module within Core, because then the customers are able to just click on the individual assets, and they can see all of the data that's been gathered about that in near real time. As soon as it's uploaded to Core, people can start browsing through it.
That was going to be my next question. Is it real time? And it sounds like it's near real time. So I'm going to kind of take us back out to that 30,000 foot view. So we've got WebCore, which is kind of this a cloud-based interface where you as Sharper Shape can interface with it, the customer can interface, and then the actual pilot out there has the iOS drone pilot for the data collection. Is that how it all works?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so we've got 3 different iOS applications that interface back into WebCore and into the bigger Core platform itself. So there's the drone pilot. There is a line crew pilot meant for walking inspections.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one for utility customers, because we have one major utility that's doing all of their linemen have this app with them in the field. They can take pictures with their iOS device that uploads directly into Core. They can mark up and annotate right there on their iPad in the field and basically do a full assessment there in the field. And then for helicopter operations, we have HeliPilot, which is invaluable for doing helicopter operations. We've been doing a lot of distribution circuits, and distribution circuits are really convoluted, and it's very easy to lose track of what you've already flown over and what you haven't. So one of the iOS apps is meant to keep helicopter operations on track, and just like the drone pilot, it will mark assets as completed, as flown, and you see that in near real time back in the office. So it's very easy to keep track of what the helicopters are out there doing and how much they have gotten done during the day.
So I assume there may be some jobs that are so big that they might have linemen walking, drones flying, and helicopters flying, maybe not all simultaneously, but along a very large area. I assume all of that is integrated. And then, for example, if the helicopter pilot sees something, he or she can mark that as red, if you will. But maybe flag something for the drone pilot to go back and get a closer in view.
Yeah, it would work that way. Absolutely. We do have customers that are using all 3 aspects of Core. They're using the helicopter applications, the line person applications, and the drone pilot applications. And in fact, one of our large customers is running an enormous, now it's 3 years running drone inspection project, multiple different companies involved in getting all of these images. And then they are using the Core applications to upload the images from the field, and then their assessors, the actual utility employees, their qualified electrical workers, are going through all those images and doing the assessments. So they've been managing this project, and I think there's over 60,000 poles that so far have been inspected with drones over the past 3 years, something like that, million images or more probably uploaded. And so these projects can get really big, but interoperability between the helicopter inspections and the drone teams, that's a little delayed, because with the helicopter operations, you're flying 40 to 60 miles of circuit a day. That's thousands of polls, and so it takes a while to actually assess all of those polls and find those flaws that you might want to have a closer look. So it would take some time to work through the system and actually be assessed down to the level where you would say, I want to send a drone team out and have a closer look at that. But that's just strictly a function of how quickly you can actually look through and assess the images, which, that's going to get better with AI, because right now humans have to do all this. So
yeah, I was just going to say that, Chris. We did a product release video with a company that is working on an AI called Valmise, and they're going to be on the show in November. So they're called ASTN groups. So keep your eye out. That's when the big release is going to be of this product. But this thing has several agents that work simultaneously, and they do things in real time. I could see an incredible application here, but I want to talk a little bit about applications, because I think it's a great segue. You mentioned about the vegetation management. We talked about that for a little bit. Let's talk about predictive asset management, because it's one thing to find something that's broken and say, okay, that has to be fixed. But I think the preventive nature of what you're doing is probably even more important than finding the broken thing, finding the thing before it breaks and becomes dangerous. So tell us a little bit about that line of effort.
Okay, well, we'd have to kind of discuss this in two different pieces.
Sure.
You've got the vegetation piece,
Yep.
and we're doing some really interesting things on the vegetation piece. And one of the things that we're doing is we use hyperspectral imaging to scan the trees. And for years now, we've been building up hyperspectral libraries of AI libraries that can look at a hyperspectral scan of vegetation, and it can identify the species fairly accurately. I mean, it's not 100% yet, but it's pretty accurate. Now you can start to do some predictive analytics about, okay, here's the tree. It's not too close to the line yet, but it's this very fast growing species. So we're gonna expect that within a year it's going to be too close to the line, and maybe we want to address it proactively. We want to get at it. So the ability to do tree species identification and tree health along the corridor, that allows for a lot of proactive kinds of activities for vegetation management. And then when we do this kind of close-up inspections with the high-resolution cameras repeatedly, we can start to see trends in terms of how things are aging. And nothing's changing on this pole. It looks like it's stable. There's very little changing. But in another case, maybe you find a pole or a tower where rust is growing very rapidly, maybe at an alarming rate, and there's where you would maybe do some proactive sorts of maintenance. So the ability to look over time and compare the same structure condition year after year, that's very important, and the ability to kind of predict how the vegetation is going to grow around lines is important.
Yeah, I never really would have thought about the, kind of predicting the tree growth rate using these technologies. That's unbelievable. I was just thinking, Chris, as you were talking, most of these poles, right? They're metal. They're not wood. Are there some wood ones out there?
Oh yeah, tons and tons of wood. Yeah, a lot of the distribution structures are wood. Even some of the transmission structures are wood.
So that, I mean, I only know a little bit about wood poles, because when I was at the Air Force Academy, they had this like a leadership reaction course, if you will. It was made of all of these logs, right? And the cadets would climb all over it and had all these structures on it. And interestingly enough, there's also inspection requirements for these, let's just call them amusement type. It really wasn't amusement, it was an educational tool, but the wood was rotting out, and it was becoming dangerous. And I can imagine that same kind of technology that you're talking about could be used. See, I just gave you a whole nother market share and line of effort that has nothing to do with critical infrastructure, but somebody needs to be inspecting those. And right now they're doing it with their eyeballs. And I imagine some of the sensors you have would be a lot more accurate with regards to not only finding flaws as they exist, but predicting like, wow, there's this crack in this structure here that, given the rate of moisture in the air, or whatever the formula is, that, this probably is going to go in the next 2 years, and you don't want a bunch of cadets climbing on it when it goes. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Just incredible uses of this technology, and certainly for critical infrastructure. But you talked about these digital twins, and I think most of our viewers know what that is. But let's real quick give a very quick definition of what a digital twin is. And the unique thing that you guys are doing, you're calling it a living digital twin. So tell us first, what is a digital twin? And secondly, how is what you're doing a little bit different and better?
Okay, so a digital twin is basically a 3D model, a digital 3D model of some physical asset. So in the utility case, I would scan a corridor with LiDAR. So I get that 3D geospatial information that I need and put that into my software. And now I've got a 3D model of the assets. Now you need to add to the digital twin, you need to add as much metadata as you can. So it's not enough just to have a LiDAR point cloud that I can kind of move around in 3D, but I want to have information about the assets within that point cloud. So that's one of the things that our software does really amazingly, and this is part of those algorithms that we got access to way back in 2013, and that we've built on ever since. When a 3D point cloud is uploaded into our core platform, these algorithms go to work and they automatically identify poles, lines, trees, and ground. And those are the things that it automatically classifies. So basically, very quickly, you have the kinds of information you need to do vegetation management. But since we've identified the poles, now I can add metadata to the pole. So it's pole number P0056. And and from the utility, I can reference back to their metadata and add that to the model. So now I start adding metadata to this 3D point cloud, and that's where you start to get a digital twin, where you've got a 3D geospatial model that includes metadata about the things within it. And so that's the digital twin. Then what we do is we do this work repeatedly, year after year after year. So what the living part of it is adding the fourth dimension of time. You've got XYZ coordinates, but you've also got time. So we can see how things are changing over time. And that's where you start to get into some really interesting applications of the technology where you can do change detection. And that is something we've been working on heavily. It is a difficult thing to do because things change a lot in the utility world, like we were just discussing.
Right.
Vegetation grows quickly. So when you start to say, okay, tell me, here's a scan in 2018, compare it to 2020, what has changed? Well, unfortunately, everything's changed pretty much. I mean, when you're looking at a utility corridor, because there's just a huge amount of change. So how do you filter out and get down to the significant kind of changes that you might want to see? That's a bit of a trick. That's where the living digital twin comes in. It's time plus the 3D geospatial knowledge that we have.
In my brain, I think of, those time-lapsed photos. We've all seen those, and maybe a little video reel where, maybe it's a puppy and then you see it grow over time to, be a full dog, full-size grown dog. Does your living digital twin kind of do something similar? In other words, that 2018 to 2020 example, could you almost like in a lapse time view, almost in one sitting, just see that change occur almost before your eyes?
Yeah, it's not something that's in the interface that is customer facing. It is something that the analytics team behind the scene can do. It is on the roadmap to make that more accessible. Like Google Earth has a time slider where you can see the different satellite images from different years, and you can compare those. That's kind of where we want to get, but it's not yet in the interface, but it is on the roadmap.
So cool, so cool. Well, that's also a great segue. You're making this easy for me, Chris. So what else is on the roadmap? You guys have come such a long way. You've done so many great things over so many years, 10 years, as you said. So again, happy anniversary there.
Thank you.
What's next? This kind of time slider, and what else do you see on the horizon for Sharper Shape?
Well, it's pretty much all about taking advantage of AI, and the technologies around AI. So one thing that we're just about to release, and I was really kind of shocked that this was already available, is the AI component identification for the poles and lines. So our software, as I said, has always been able to take a point cloud and identify poles, lines, trees, and ground. But now it can take an image and in near real time can identify the components that are on that pole. So here's an insulator, here's a spark arrestor, here's a jumper wire, and it highlights those and puts bounding boxes around all of them in near real time. As soon as you upload photos into the platform, this is coming like in a week or two, but it's not in the
Wow.
current version out there. But
Okay.
yeah, it's working beautifully right now, and I've been playing around with it, and I'm really impressed with it. So when that gets released, that's going to really help people build AI models for defect detection, and that's where we want to get. So right now we are about to release automatic component identification algorithms that will take an image and show you exactly what components you have on that, and it will draw a bounding box around it. Now that I have a bounding box around a component, say it's an insulator,
Mm-hmm.
you can start to train the AI model into what a good insulator looks like and what a bad insulator looks like, and that's really where the difficulty is in standing up AI defect detection. Is you need lots and lots of examples of good and bad components.
Yeah.
So that's this thing that's about to be released will almost automatically create these models that the AI can start to consume. And as you start identifying bad insulators within the bounding box, then the AI says, okay, I know that's what a bad one looks like. It's chipped or it's broken or whatever. So at any rate, that's one thing that's happening, and then two, leveraging the power of these large language models like ChatGPT and such. How that's going to work into the platform is going to be very interesting to see in the coming years. But right now, it's defect detection would be really a marvelous thing if we could get there. It's not there yet. I don't think anybody in the industry really has it working yet, because there's just a lot of difficulties. There's when you take a picture of an insulator, the lighting can be so different from one image to another. The insulator itself can be so different from one in to another, and there's a lot of visual noise. You see the background and the trees and all that stuff in there, and it's a difficult thing for components to be 100% identified as having a defect or not, but that's what we're working towards.
Wow, well, that's exciting, and looking forward to seeing all those things. And speaking of seeing things, when can we maybe see you or Sharper Shape? Because you talked about how early on in your career you walked around these trade shows, you ran into Sharper Shape,
Oh
you were
yeah,
so impressed by them,
yeah,
you jumped ship and joined them, and here you are these many years later.
yeah.
What's the next show, or where can people find you?
Well, it's been a while since I've been in the trade show business and in the marketing business, and maybe one of my colleagues can help me out with this. I should have gotten a list of the trade shows we're going to be at, but we have been attending almost all the big drone shows. We also attend several of the utility conferences that are more specific to utility maintenance and vegetation maintenance, that aren't necessarily drone or helicopter shows. But I think we'll be at most of the shows, and I'm sorry I don't have a list for you. I wish I did.
No worries, no worries. Well, we are almost at time here. So, Chris, I'm going to give you the last minute or so to mention anything that we missed here and any concluding remarks you want to make to the audience.
Okay, well, maybe for this audience, a big thing that I would like to emphasize is that we have just released about 6 months ago a new drone service provider offering, which is basically some of the technologies that we've talked about here, the iOS drone pilot application and access to Core, the ability to upload images into Core to analyze those, and that there's kind of a tailored set of technologies for drone service providers, because in the past we've been really focused on servicing the utilities directly, but we aren't flying much in terms of using drones ourselves anymore. We've kind of gotten out of that business, and we're happy to partner with people out there that are drone service providers, and we are providing this package of these really advanced tools that will allow these drone service providers to do the kinds of work that they want to do very efficiently. And that's something I want to make sure people are aware of and should contact us. And if you're a drone service provider, this is a set of tools I think you would want to have in your hands.
And Chris, how can people reach you as we close out the show?
Well, is my contact information in this
Why don't you just give them real quick your email address?
Sure. So it's Chris, CHRIS, McMurtry, McMurtry, so just my first and last name with a period in between, at sharpershape.com. And I'd be more than happy to take any questions from your audience and follow up. And yeah, love to hear from people, and I'll get you to the right people for any interest in terms of acquiring the drone service provider pack.
All right, awesome. Well, that's all she wrote, everybody. We are out here. Thank you so much.